Hello, this is Tread Talks, and today we'll be talking about, well, kind of whatever, okay? I don't really have a subject today. I usually do, but not this time. I'm just going to talk about stuff that interests me, okay? In fact, call this Things I Find Interesting, okay? A new series I've created, okay? So, yeah, genius stuff I know. So, things that interest me. Well, you probably already know at this point, but like Transformers, Godzilla, or cool stuff like that. I'm very interested in history stuff, although I don't really talk about it that much. Um, I was a big fan of sci-fi stuff, obviously. Um, like Star Wars and Dune, all that good stuff. Uh, Fantasy. I kind of like fantasy, but I'm not too big with it. But one thing that interests me are the people behind our modern media. Okay, people like Frank Miller or Grant Morrison. In fact, I feel like a lot of people who create like movies or comics or games are way more interesting than the actual thing they made. Like a good example is like a lot of the comic guys, like Grant Morrison or Alan Moore. Like those two guys both think they're wizards. Like they actually do believe they're wizards. I guess drawing people in a spandex for like I don't know, like 20 years. It'll probably mess your brain up like a little bit. And the funny thing is, those guys like hate each other. I remember I was like watching this video. It's like an article that the YouTubers saw that made jokes saying, "Oh, I bet these two guys have wizard battles when they argue." Maybe they probably do that. Underground wizard fights over people in spandex. That's interesting. Okay, that is very interesting. Okay, if you know anything about me, I like stuff like that. Like obscure, random stuff. But also a big fan of random characters. Like Transformers. One of my favorite Transformer characters is Skywarp. Even though he's like a C-list character. Okay, he doesn't really do that much, and anything outside of comics. The comics he actually does a lot, but like in the well movies, which he's only appeared like two of them, and then the comics is an insane difference. It's an insane difference. Like he has full character arcs. He fights people. He redeems himself or becomes even more evil. But like in the movies, well, let's think about this for a second. Okay, he appeared in the original Transformers movie from the '80s. Okay, he gets his ass kicked. He gets thrown out of a ship, and he becomes a a Cyclonus clone. But the kind of retcon that, like the scene after, and he's like, oh no, he's actually a sweep. He's actually a Scourge person. It's weird with the ending choice of that particular scene that I've confused fans for years. Uh, and other stuff he appears in, like in Rise, Bumblebee. If you remember from the Cybertron scene, you can see his character model, but you don't like see him specifically. Just his model, as like a copy. Um, and also like in Transformers One, he's also a background character. He doesn't. do anything. For the movies, he does like nothing, and barely says anything. Um, but even then, I'm so fan of his character. Wanna know why? Because I like obscure stuff. Um, and speaking of Transformers, one of the most interesting Transformer characters is Thunderwing. He is a villain, and I felt like if things went correctly, he could have been one of the greats. He was a big deal in the Marvel comics. In fact, he stole not the Matrix of leadership or the Allspark. It's been a while since I reread the Marvel comics, but he eventually steals a very important thing from the Autobots, and he becomes a demon. Okay, he literally goes from robot to demon. Like it is so interesting. And also in the IDW comics, he's like a Shockwave like S guy, like a mad crazy scientist dude who uh who makes the pretender technology. At least in IDW. And also IDW becomes the bludgeon. Even though originally Thunderwing and Bludgeon are separate characters, but in IDW they just made him the same guy, pretty much. Which interesting creative choice, but one nonetheless. Um, but I wish Thunderwing appears a way more media. Like he signs in the comics a lot. He can go toe to toe with like Optimus and pretty much any Autobot. If you look up any like internet stuff, people are like, "Wow, Thunderwing's overpowered. He can fight like 10 Autobots and win. He can fight the most experienced out of any of them, make them like you know look like nothing." Okay, yeah, we don't see him that much, even in comics. It's kind of spread out. And in the films, nothing. We don't see Thundering in any movies ever. Marvin little cameo. It's very disappointing, but I think it's interesting. Um, other thing I think it's interesting is like it's like I said earlier, like sci-fi stuff. The thing that interests me is like the original version of Dune. It was originally going to be directed by some artsy fartsy dude, and the original vision is going to be like this colorful. I pasted like 40 hours, like epic. It was ridiculous. It could be like talking dogs and like these over color, over designed like ships in the movie. If you know anything about that, well, it was obviously never made because it's like a multi-day long movie is like insane. Um, but I think it's pretty cool. I guess. Um, and yeah, that's really all I gotta say for like part one of this series. Things I find interesting.